As of the last video, I told you I'd take a look at some soybean fields that didn't do too well before we got rain. The rain just came too late. And I know I get these comments come out every time after a rain has come after a long dry period. The first thing I hear is the rains just came in a nick of time. And they say that every time. The problem of it is they didn't come in a nick of a time. It was just way too dry for their full potential in the first place because the rains came too late, basically. But before I do that, I just thought this is kind of interesting. I didn't have any Bex beans. If you saw my crop comments last year, you'll know why. I wasn't very happy with the Bex beans. For my ground, they weren't performing very well. Plus, I just believe that the price they put on them, they were just overvalued. I shared that and so forth. However, the guy that sells Bex beans in my area is a super guy and just a really nice guy, and kind of like to work with him more. It's just the product just didn't seem to be there for me. However, at the end of the planting this year, I was a couple of bushels short, and so I needed something else to put into the planter to finish up. And he had an 08 bean that he happened to have on hand. Now, I don't plant early beans, and I haven't for a practice. I like the later ones simply because in this area, we normally will get fairly dry in August. However, we'll get those rains seem to usually come in right around Labor Day weekend again. And so on those real late maturities, it seems like you can pick up a little bit of help for the soybeans to finish out. So I picked up these two earlier beans, and you can see them. I'll just show you. As you can see, there's 4 rows of them right here to help me finish up this field. And actually, for an early bean, I thought it did look pretty good. And I was just going to point it out because if the season was fairly late, as far as planting, you couldn't get into your field, you had to look for something earlier, and these are already turning, of course. These are going to turn quite a bit ahead of I have Brabant, it's a 1.8 bean. I got to look at here. Oh yeah, 182s, the B182s on the rest of this field, which are just absolutely super. As my favorite bean actually this year. But as these 08s, if you just look at those beans, look at all the pods on there. I mean, it actually looks pretty good. And they're filling out pretty good. And sure, they aren't going to fill out many here on top. Or just a little bit on the dry side on this field too. And this field I have one advantage on. I have a 2 to 4 foot water table here. So this one, it takes a lot to get this field to really dry out. However, in this environment, it was under stress as well. Unfortunately, and I'll show you a little easier to see on the other farms there, but the rains that we did get weren't even enough to fill up the cracks. And so that was kind of disappointing too. But for this 08 bean, I gotta say, it wasn't a bad bean. I give you the number even. It was an 0830 E3. And I thought for especially you're planting late, can't get them in, or if you're looking for an early bean, it's certainly one of those that I would say would be worth a try. Like I say, I don't normally do it. So I'm going to go over and show you a couple of the fields that were challenging, and the rains were not in the nick of time, and it was just too dry, too long. The rains would have had to have been here at least 2 to 3 weeks earlier in order to save those fields. Let's go take a look. Here we are at the first field I'll show you. This field I put on a Pioneer 19A66 enlist bean. Let me check that number just to make sure. Yep, that's the number. The biggest thing they told me they'd be concerned on this bean is white mold, because it gets big, it grows together, and so it also handles drought real well. So put it on your lighter soil. So I put it on my lightest field that I have. And we're in one of the best parts of this field, which normally the beans would be waist high. I'm walking through here all together. And as you notice here, they're far from waist high. I mean, they just barely, if I back up here, they just barely got knee high for me. and they certainly aren't together. So there just isn't much, plus they're turning. The beans are already turning, and it is a later bean for our area. It just run out of moisture. The rain that we had just wasn't enough. It wasn't there. I'd say the pods that are here are filling nice, but you know, mostly 2 bean pods. There's some 3 beans, but most of them are 2 bean pods. I mean, we're looking at a fairly poor yield here, and this bean field just never got off to a good start. As I said, the rains did not come in the nick of time. They just came way too late, and so a few weeks before we finally got a couple inches of rain on this field, they had been standing still. They weren't even growing. They were just like sitting there waiting for a rain to come. The rain just came too late for them to fully develop and even reach near their potential. So this is the first one we'll see. We'll go across the road and I'll show you the other field. By the way, if you're interested in how hot is it there at this time, well, yesterday it was actually a little hotter than it is today. Yesterday we were at 113 degree heat index, and yeah, it was pretty tough to keep working outside. Today isn't quite as hot. I didn't look at the temperature, so it's a little less than it was yesterday anyway. But now we're into those Mustang 20 E723s, and there's a counterpart. You know, all these, many of those seeds that have Monsanto traits in them are sold across a wide variety of brands. So, you know, I believe the Brevant also has the matching bean as well. If that's a bean that you normally buy, you can match it up. It is a pretty decent bean for chlorosis. I'd say what I saw this year, I would favor the Brevant 182 on a year like this year, but you don't want to put all your beans, all your farms into one bean, of course. So let's say if you're going to split them out, I mean, those are 2, I think, pretty good varieties to kind of give you kind of a balance. This one, of course, had a little bit more moisture going for it in the iron chlorosis type ground. That's a bad thing because of the fact that it continues to draw salts upward. On the other hand, it can be also good in this type of a situation because these beans were able to get just a little bit more height on than the other field I showed you. However, I was looking at the pods. I'm not real hepped on how many pods I'm looking at here, and you know, them filling out. I mean, we're still looking at a lot of 2 bean pods. There are, I'd say, more 3 bean pods here. As far as size wise, this isn't probably going to get to be real large. And another problem we had, of course, too, is a lot of them didn't fill the rows. On some of the areas here I was walking through, they actually did. They actually touched one row to the next. I didn't put any fungicide on these fields simply because they did not look like they had the potential to be holding a lot of moisture for any real length of time, because I could see their canopy just wasn't going to be there. The first field I was in, I put fungicide on that one. I put fungicide on another one as well. I think we're going to go over there next. Some of these areas, yeah, they're not like great. You know, but on the other hand, we're going to hit some spots here. Like here, it's starting to get a little bit more where it actually was able to canopy together, as you can see. So in these areas, you know, we're going to get some pretty good areas, even right up to the corn over there. As you can see, that corn is actually taking more of a beating than these beans right here are, and the corn is really suffering. One interesting thing I'll just kind of put in here, I'll note, I ended last video with the Pioneer 9624, and I said, wow, this one really beat the drought, I thought, pretty good. That was pretty dry soil I had on there, and it really looked quite good. When I went back to check the scores on all my corn, the 9624 was actually a corn that gave the highest score in drought conditions. So when I saw that, I said, yeah, that probably didn't surprise me then. Now I'll just give you a real quick look here again at this is the same bean as the last field we were just in, the Mustang 20 E723. And you can see with just a little bit more water holding capacity in this soil, what a difference. However, I'm not real impressed with how many pods I'm looking at there and the size of the beans. I mean, these beans are already shutting down for the year, starting to mature, come into their maturity. And so I'm just not seeing a real positive look on the beans, even in the real nice looking ones, you know, where you have good canopy and good foliage. Here I'm stepping into the bean that is the Pioneer 19A66 once again. Again, better holding capacity. However, yeah, they filled up the rows here. And I did put fungicide on this field because of it. However, that fungicide I put on does not do anything for white mold. Fights off a lot of other diseases, but you know, and are we looking at a real good bean here? Well, this would be one of the best spots we're stepping into. As you can see, didn't make a nice cluster on top. No, we didn't get that. You know, we probably got a little bit more fill coming on these pods. I wouldn't say a huge number of pods there. However, they're going to be are filling a little bit nicer, going to be a little larger bean. So they might not be too bad right in this spot here. So that's how this one is shaping up. Before we get to the last field, I'll just show you a neighboring field to mine, just as a cautionary thing. These guys do a phenomenal job of farming, excellent farmers, no question of that. Sometimes timing isn't always the best. They're trying to do the right thing by making sure all the weeds are cleaned up in the field and so forth. Did some drop nozzling. However, after doing the drop nozzling, you mix that together with the real dry conditions that we've had that's really weakened up that stalk. We had a wind go through when that rain came. And of course, you can see what can devastate a cornfield. You know, certainly would have never expected that. It just, things happen when you're trying to do a good job and trying to keep a good job done with your weeds and so forth. And it's a very unfortunate incident, but certainly I'd say no fault of their own. And just doing general practices like you should to do a good job of taking care of the land, taking care of trying to produce the best crop you can. And just a very unfortunate situation just because of the conditions we had this year. I'm just coming back to this Golden Harvest 1362 one more time. As I said, it had one drawback. I didn't feel it looked like it was able to handle the drought as well as the other varieties I had. However, if I had one bean out of all my bean lineup to pick for heavy iron chlorosis ground, it would be this Golden Harvest 1362. Also, you can find it in many other companies as well, similar variety. But if you look at it overall, as you can see, it's already starting to mature, because it is, other than that 08 I have for a few rows there I showed at the beginning of the video, this is the earliest bean I've got. And I had it just because a rep I really trust, and it's done so well for me over the years, told me give this one a try and see how this one does on that iron chlorosis ground. And wow, it really did an excellent job. I was so happy with it from the beginning. Here you can see now the difference between the Golden Harvest and then over here I've got the Pioneer. There's a 1.7, so you're talking 4 days later in maturity. However, if you looked at both of the beans, I really don't think there's going to be any yield difference. If anything, I'd have to probably give it to that Golden Harvest number. The Pioneer one here is a 17A87. Still a good bean, good on iron chlorosis. Really didn't see its full potential either, simply because of the fact that we just didn't have rain. Now later maturity, it's going to need rain. Well, we can just take a check here. As you can look, I mean, it's filling out what beans it has. It's filling out pretty nicely. The beans are, but if you take a look at the Golden Harvest 1362, it's doing the same thing. It's filling out those beans real nicely that it has. It's really going to be a tough one here to take any type of long-term decisions on these type of crops here and the conditions we've got. And up here we're probably a little bit on the drier side right here too. We step down off of that little bit of a knoll I've got. You know, we may we'll take a look at the beans here maturing over here. And these seem to canopy pretty nice too. We'll just take a look at these over here again. Golden Harvest 1362. These are maturing, but boy, they sure do have a lot of pods for the short beans they are. They're filling out really nicely. Over here, they're still in their green stage. And a little bit taller plant. Got a little bit more moisture right in this spot. Filling out really nice, but these are turning fairly quickly. Another week or so, these will be pretty yellow. I'm not even going to bother going into the corn. We've already done that several times. And that corn is, you know, a lot of it was just drying up. Other areas where it was able to hold the moisture a little bit better. Corn looks much better. I'll be going over those varieties later. So we'll maybe do one more crop update here before harvest. We'll see how it goes. Here's a nice spot here again. We'll show more of the capability of this Golden Harvest 1362. You know, you can run up and down that plant. We didn't get the extra pods because we didn't get the extra rain or anything like that, but what's there is filling up pretty nice. What I like is they fill up a 30-inch row really nice. So I'm gonna just kind of wrap it up with that for now. I'll be putting on a lot more corn and corn next year. Soybean acres is still going to be a little bit on the lower side for me. I won't be raising as many soybeans again next year. However, I'd say I learned a lot about the newer varieties that have come out again. And I think we got a couple of numbers I'd like to stick with, as well as see what else is coming out and being offered for this coming year. So until next time, stay cool. We'll see ya.